Welcome to Soundbites. I'm Eric Barnes, doing the hosting duties today here with Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield, and Natalie Van Gundy is producing, but not on the microphone this week. Just not. Absolutely not. And this week on Soundbites, we want to talk about places to go and work remotely. I guess sort of kind of related to food. I mean, it is a food podcast or coffee or just the availability of water, maybe. I don't know. Somehow we'll link it to food. Haven't quite worked that out. We're going to work that out in progress. So, Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
You were a late edition. You weren't going to be.
Yeah. No.
But this is like your life. Working remotely is you.
It is my life. Yeah. So like you were hosting, which is nice because it was not crystal clear that I would be joining in, but here I am jumping in.
Yep. And Holly, you have notes.
I have
you
notes.
Have thoughts.
I have thoughts. Food is very important to me in a place to remote work. So there you go. Tied in.
Yeah. I do. I am obsessed, and I talk about it all the time. On whenever I sit in on this, I think I do it on Sidebar also, which comes up next at 11:30 on WYXR 91.7. Mike McCarthy, local filmmaker. But I digress.
If you're listening on radio,
if you're listening on a
podcast, it's not coming up next unless you make it happen
in your podcast feed,
which you can.
I do work remotely, kind of obsessively, in coffee shops, restaurants, and bars. And we did last week. Was that last week, Holly? That we did the breweries, which was actually kind of fun to think through all the breweries. Not so much, we talked about good beer. We didn't really pick on anybody about beer we didn't like, but as places to go, which was interesting to talk about and some I hadn't thought about. But I'll start with Holly because she's got her pen ready. What do you look, let's just do it generally. What do you look for in a place to work, and what are you working on?
So prior to joining the Daily Memphian earlier this year, I did a lot of remote work for a dozen years before that. I am in this office with our team all the time now, which is fun, but I do still remote work. So I'll put it that way. What I'm looking for is I need an outlet. I need an electrical outlet. I need there to be food, substantial food, not like a bread sugar item, but like an item that has a protein included in it.
Good. Yeah.
And I need it to not be boiling hot. I need the temperature to be correct.
Oh, you mean the ambient temperature in the room?
The temperature in the room. Yes.
Natalie's laughing at my question. But it was a fair question. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I think most of us don't want boiling hot food. But I didn't. Yeah, the temperature. Sorry. That's actually, you really thought about this. Those are all key things. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, Chris, your key criteria.
Yeah, those are not necessarily my criteria are somewhat different. To me, in terms of the kind of work, there's sort of three genres of work I'm doing if I'm working remotely. Either I'm writing, in which case I'm really burrowing into my laptop and air traffic controller style, or I'm sort of taking notes and responding to emails and doing more light work, or I'm meeting someone for an interview or that kind of thing, right? And so different places are better for each of those different things sometimes. I typically am not, there are some exceptions, which I have here, not necessarily looking for somewhere to have a meal while I eat. Where I go depends on, I have different places in different parts of the city. And so where I'm going is based on other things that are happening in my day. And so I'll find remote workplaces around the normal flow of my day. So I have downtown spots, I have midtown spots, I have a university district spot, I have a couple of East Memphis spots, and I've got a Germantown Parkway spot. Yeah. And so I'm not choosing to go to any of those places. I'm doing other things in my day, and then I'm working around that. Whether that's, going, to a Grizzlies practice or coming here for a podcast or doing other things. But I'm someone who works remotely pretty much constantly because my dogs don't like for me to work at home.
I remember doing podcasts with you during COVID and meetings in COVID. And it was just chaos.
The old big dog in particular looks at me expectantly all day and sort of grunts and whines at me and wonders why I'm not giving her things if I'm at home. And so it's just I'm trying to get past this. I need to try to start working home. In fact, after this podcast, I am going to go home and try to write something from home and so see how that goes. But it's real hard for me to work from home. And then if I have other things going on, I tend to just bounce around all day, all over the city. Not all over the city every day, but I could be downtown. I could be in Germantown Parkway. Depends on what's going on.
I forgot to answer part of your question,
which
is what I'm working on. And these days when I'm working remote, at a third location that's not my house or our headquarters, I'm writing.
World
That's what I'm doing.
headquarters.
Our world headquarters. I am writing. Like I'm working on my book stuff, or I'm writing a story for the Daily Memphian. It's very much that. If I'm doing some other stuff or like admin, personal admin, like bank stuff, I can't focus on that in my house. I have to like
interesting.
go somewhere else and try to make it not suck so bad.
Yeah, that's one of the things I do from home is like sort of paying the bills and checking on stuff, all the personal admin stuff. But then I do like for writing, if I'm working on a book or something like that, that's pretty much going to be a bar or a restaurant bar kind of setup, or a coffee shop maybe if I have to. And then for Daily Memphian day job stuff, there's kind of a series like Chris of coffee shops around town that I'm going to end up in based on where my day is going. And we can walk through some of those. But I think the temperature thing, I hadn't thought about that, but that's absolutely important. Mm-hmm. The light is important, especially if I'm writing, like working on fiction, because I don't want to be in some bright, fluorescent place. And I would say just like that it feels relatively good in there. Like I don't like working in a gross place, I mean, I really don't. But really, but some people do, I think, or some people don't care. No, I mean, some people really don't care. And I'm sort of, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting bougier by the year.
I'm not saying
that's the name of my autobiography.
I'm not
bougier by the year.
I'm not saying,
year. Sorry, bougier by the year. The Eric Barnes story. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not saying these places are gross, but I think a place where I find myself fairly frequently that you probably don't is at Starbucks. And it depends.
More than you think, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah. And so, like, I've gotten back into the habit. I'm about to have to get back out of this habit in the near future. But I've gotten back in the habit of writing early in the morning, sometimes at the Midtown Starbucks, the Union and McLean, which I used to do basically every day when I did the 901 column years ago. And so, like, this morning, like, I wrote, I do a weekly Grizzlies column in season that's like a long form, multi-item kind of thing early every week. And I wrote that this morning I got up at, got there at 6 a.m. and like knocked that out before my radio hit with Jeff Calkins. And I find the Starbucks stuff works for me. I don't go there to like do light work because it's not as pleasant. I like to be more pleasant for light work. Right. But if I'm getting into air traffic controller mode and I'm just going to knock out the world for 2 hours and like just, put 2,000 words on the page. Like I like Starbucks for that because I can put on my headphones and really like zone out of everything around me. And I feel no guilt about sitting there for 3 hours and drinking one like venti iced coffee.
Right.
And so that works for me. So like that Midtown Starbucks I'll find myself at, that works for me sitting at the counter, facing the window. I don't see the rest of the room. Sometimes when I do my morning radio with Jeff Calkins in studio, I'll begin my day at the Starbucks out on White Station and Poplar, sort of that area. Not a lot of coffee shops in East Memphis, really.
Wait, is there one out there still?
Out by Clark Tower.
It moves like across the street.
Yeah, that's right in the parking lot.
Sometimes I'll start my day there if I know I'm going to go in studio because that's the closest really public working space to the radio station.
It is, yeah.
And when I did the Germantown Parkway story earlier in the summer, and I found myself on Germantown Parkway a lot, like before and after, like stopping at places for meals. There's a Starbucks out there that's actually kind of nice by Starbucks standards. I find myself working out there a lot.
Which one's that?
It's the one that's close to like Green Bamboo. By the Noodle House and by all of that.
I have definitely worked at that Starbucks before. Mm-hmm.
It has like a covered patio kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
And it is a nicer feel than a lot of them. So Starbucks is in my rotation. I've got about 8 or 9 places that are sort of in my rotation, and there are like 3 Starbucks that are in the rotation.
I actually, because sometimes if scheduling is weird and I'm out near the WKNO studios, which is way out on not Hexcross, on Cherry Road, Cherry Farms Road,
sort of off
between Winton and Appling,
not Cherry Road,
not Cherry Road, near, because that has happened. The Starbucks at the Wolf Chase Mall is not. It's fine. It's Starbucks nice. It's good. It's a bizarre parking lot.
It's a complicated in and out situation.
It's very strange.
There.
But inside there, it's fine. I can sit there. So there's Starbucks I go to. They've kind of the Midtown one sometimes.
That's right. Down from that big, nice Barnes & Noble. And I bet people go there and work. I never have, but I bet that would work.
I used to work at the Barnes & Noble in New York, but that was 25 plus years ago. Do you go to Starbucks? Do you ever end up in a Starbucks?
Yes,
They're like little safe outposts. They're known quantities.
Quantities. Well, here
Wi-Fi's good.
Like
they're not
confession.
going to harass you to tell you like, hey, are you going to order another coffee?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
surprisingly helpful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I feel like the Midtown one at Union and McLean has at times felt fairly local. Like I would go in there and I would see people, or they would be like obviously providing shelter to some people, which is great. I mean, I will tell you, I wrote most of my book in the library or in that Starbucks at like between 6 and 9 p.m. because there's not a place that's not a bar where you can go and work after work.
Right.
So I was like, sorry to the local spots, but you're not open.
Yeah, most. Right. I don't know.
So
I'm sure I'm forgetting. I mean, French Truck is now open till like 6 or 7 in Crosstown, and maybe the other ones are. But I need it
to be until like 8 because I'm going to not get there until 6, and I need like the 2 hours.
This is why I end up in bars.
There have been a few times where I have gone, and it's not, I don't work at night very often, but there have been a few times where I have gone to that Midtown Starbucks at night because there was no other option, Cafe Eclectic's closed or whatever. And yeah, you're right. Not a lot of coffee shops open late.
And I think Otherlands, I mean, there was the whole pandemic thing when even that Starbucks closed earlier, and then Otherlands started closing earlier. But Otherlands, I think now is open until 6 or 7. But
if you want to be somewhere at like 8 o'clock or whatever.
Exactly. That doesn't work. And also, I've been in there at like 6. Let's say they close at 7. I've been in there at 6. They're done.
Yeah, and they're sweeping under your feet.
They don't want you to be there.
And that's part of that environmental thing. Like, you really don't, you want to know you can work till a certain amount of time. And they're not going to be like, even if they're really nice, there's a place that shall go unnamed that is owned by Kevin Keogh, where they're open till 2, but I mean, it's kind of getting quiet, and they know me, and I go there a lot, and they're like, oh no, you can sit, but they're stacking chairs in there. And I just feel like I'm a burden to them. I don't think they're doing anything bad. They're working.
I totally understand it, but I'm also going to not go there.
So it doesn't quite work when places are like that. That's the thing. Let me do housekeeping real quick. We're here on Soundbites, which airs on WYXR 91.7 every Thursday at 11. Here today with Holly Whitfield and Chris Harrington. I'm Eric Barnes. Coming up, if you're listening on WYXR, next is the Sidebar. I'm just going to promote the heck out of Sidebar. That's my whole point today. This is one, we do 2 shows on WYXR Sidebar, which this week we'll have Mike McCarthy on. We have arts, culture, that kind of thing. This is obviously a food show, but it is also a podcast on the Daily Memphian and available wherever you get your podcasts. We have other podcasts, including our Grizzlies podcast that Chris and Drew Hill do for us. We brought back the Tigers podcast with Greg Gaston hosting that, and folks from Daily Memphian like Tim Buckley and Frank Bonner and Parth coming on. And we have On the Record, which is a politics podcast we do kind of ad hoc that Bill Dries does more, but actually Sam Hardiman's doing a bunch now. And so we did a lot with the mayor's race and so on. And I've forgotten a podcast, or no, I have not. I'm looking at Natalie Van Gundy to say, Behind the Headlines is a podcast available on Daily Memphian and through wherever you get your podcasts that we do with the good folks over at WKNO every Friday. Where are we going here? So other places, I'm trying to think of other places I go. Like I really like, I work a lot at Hustle and Dough. Partly because it's really good coffee and it's right down the street. I work a lot at French Truck in Crosstown, which is funny because I'll see Chris there and we kind of do the nod because you can kind of sometimes just say hi, and sometimes we just like, I'm kind of really in the middle of something, and then sometimes I'll see Keely Brewer there. So I've seen 4 staff members plus me in Crosstown, which I think is part of the reason people think that so many people think we're based in Crosstown.
Well, Crosstown's a particularly good. And that's one of the places on my list that we hadn't talked about yet. It's an obvious one. That's particularly good because you don't have to. There is a coffee shop there in the main atrium, the French Truck, but you don't have to go to French Truck to go to Crosstown, right?
Right.
So you can bring your own coffee, you can bring your own lunch, you can do whatever, and just go find a nook somewhere in the building. And so, I live in the neighborhood, and until this year, I had a kid there. My daughter went to high school there. She graduated last year, and until last week, I was doing a radio show there every week on WYXR. And so, like, that's probably, in terms of places other than my home where I spend the most time, Crosstown Concourse and FedEx Forum are probably the top 2.
Right.
And so I'm at Crosstown Concourse a lot, and there'll be some days where I just show up and I just spend the day, and like I'm going to work on the 4th floor for a few hours, and then I'll get a coffee, and then I'll work on the 7th floor, and then I'll get lunch, and then
The question is because I've never been back in the bowels, particularly of FedEx Forum. Is that a good place to work? Or is it just
no? But I'm there for Grizzlies games all the time.
Okay,
it's not at all a good place to work.
Yeah,
there's a little media room, and so if I'm writing a game column, I'll write it from the arena. But
when they get their hundreds of millions of dollars from the state and local and all that kind of stuff, what would your selfish for you and the other media members' request be?
Well, the request that will happen or won't happen, because
whatever, just your request. If your request from your point of view.
My request that won't happen is to reverse the trend away from better media seating during games. The funny thing is, I did a Grizzlies blog for the Memphis Flyer for years. I was the music and film editor of the Flyer. So the blog started as like a sideline and then developed into sort of one of the three legs of my stool. But I was literally like blogging for an alt weekly, and I sat courtside for years. And now, like, we got one seat. And so Drew sits down courtside, and I sit, up in the nosebleeds with 95% of the media that's there. Yeah. And so I would love to have a closer look at the games, but that's not going to happen because they're trying to sell that space.
Right.
And so, like, if we could get some better refreshments after the game.
Yeah,
because it used to be that the media room and the media dining was on the same area.
Yeah,
and now it's two different areas, so we can't even get like water after the game. Water would be nice. That's what I asked for. I asked for water,
some water and some gruel. From the nosebleeds.
They turn the Wi-Fi out. Get out.
That's right. just some water. That's all I need.
Other places.
You mentioned another one that was on my list. So since you brought it up, Vice and Virtue / Arrive Hotel / Bar Hustle, whatever you want to call it. So if I'm going to do light work downtown in the morning, say before coming into the office for a podcast like this, I'll either be there or I'll be at Comeback Coffee on the North End. I don't find the Vice and Virtue space good for working unless I get a seat at the bar itself and I can set up my laptop there.
Definitely. That's true. Because otherwise you're in your lap.
And I like sitting at the bar to work. Otherwise, it's a good place to sit and chat with somebody.
Right.
But I need to sit at the bar, which I can usually find a spot at the bar. It's not that populated.
Or you can sit outside. If the weather's good, it's a great place to sit outside.
But Comeback Coffee I love. And I think it's a real comfortable space. Great coffee. Food options are not plentiful, but usually they'll have some decent pastries in the morning, or they may have the biscuit sandwiches from Kinfolk there. But I just think that's a really comfortable space to work in.
I used to work when our world headquarters was on the north end of downtown. I could walk over there, or it was just way more convenient to go there. Which is unfortunate that I don't go there as much. Holly?
Well, I also like Hustle and Dough / Arrive, and I also like Crosstown. I've talked about that on the podcast before. But so I'll talk about some different places. If you're in Broad Avenue or you're somewhere in between Midtown, East Memphis, I like City and State.
I do too.
For working?
Because they have kind of small tables that are like 2-person tables that all have outlets.
If the weather's nice, I can sit outside and work there, but the seating inside is just not comfortable enough to me.
Fair enough.
To me, that's a great place to get a good coffee and like hang out and talk to somebody for half an hour, but that's not a place where I feel
That's one of my middle Memphis kind of places where I really like it, but if my schedule is such, it's just a great place to land, whether I'm meeting with somebody. But I do like working there. I prefer working outside. It's a nice place to work outside. But keep going, Holly. Other stuff.
Yes. So I think we should bring back Republic Coffee. We need a coffee shop.
Where was Republic?
It was
different
kind
places.
of like behind. Well, it was different places, but I remember it being kind of like behind the like Central Library, like north of there, kind of in the same middle of Memphis. We're talking about.
That was it before or after? I think before that was on Madison.
Yes, and that was before I think my time or before I was aware of it.
Where like the Wizard shop is or whatever. Now in Madison.
One place that I worked for many years when I was doing I Love Memphis blog was the Cafe Eclectic that was by the University of Memphis, because they had booths with outlets and they had like you could get wraps with chicken or like salad or whatever. They had terrible ventilation in there. Like I don't know what was going on. I breathed in so many like whatever fumes of whatever they were doing. It's closed now, so I can say that. The Midtown one is great. The food is great, but it's so hectic in there. I kind of feel
really feel bad
unless it's a really off-peak time. Which do they even have that?
Though I found the Wi-Fi doesn't really work very well in there. I mean, I live in that neighborhood. To me, that's more of a like grab a book and have a meal and read at the bar kind of place than a workplace.
Right.
Wi-Fi, like back to temperature, lighting, all that. Wi-Fi is huge.
Wi-Fi is huge.
Actually,
so Bell Tower.
Yeah.
Coffee shop, which is now across the street from where that Cafe Eclectic was by the University of Memphis on Highland. Yeah. That's a good place. It's also packed with students, but they have food, like real food.
Not a great outlet situation.
Not a great outlet situation. Yep,
I learned that. What kind of computers are y'all using?
the ones that you have given us. If you would like to upgrade, we'll take it.
Well, I mean, I don't have to talk about that.
I will say that
I never, and I have my own laptop, but so the company didn't buy it for me. It wasn't a fancy laptop. I never had problems with.
No, I have this MacBook Pro that I use. That's good with the battery, and then I have a MacBook Air. That's my own that I use. That's good. This was more in the days when
Dells are not so spectacular.
Right. This was more in the days when I was doing like 5 hours out, as opposed to now where it's like a 2 or 3 hour thing, and that's fine. But if I was really going all day, which I have spent 6 or 7 hours at the Memphis library, working
I get you.
at times, that's when I'm like concerned about everything dying.
So the university district, since you bring that up, that's one of my zones. I used to work at the Cafe Eclectic a lot back in the day. Bell Tower, I find, is good if I want to have a meal and do some quicker, lighter work. I don't find it good for like, I'm going to be here 2 hours because of various issues, including the outlet stuff. I find myself at French Truck all the time. I find myself at French Truck in the university district a lot. Until today, as we record, my wife worked at the University of Memphis. Today's actually her last day. My son is on campus, so that's in my orbit. I really like the French Truck there. If you want to work like hardcore work, you got to get the right seat because it's also there are some limited outlet issues. But I like there's lots of sunlight. There's a nice little open air patio there on Highland, and so that's become my university district spot for the most part. A couple other places I'll just throw out real quick because I know we'll probably run out of time that have not been mentioned. My other downtown spot, if I'm going to get lunch while working, it's Tamp and Tap. I find myself.
Is that still going?
It is.
Yeah.
It's walking. I hadn't been there in a while, but now the basketball season is back. It is walking distance from FedEx Forum. So I thought if the Grizzlies are practicing, say in the afternoon, I want to grab lunch and work before walking over, or if it's a late morning shoot around, I want to walk somewhere after. Like that's a good spot for me. There's lots of seating, pretty good sandwiches. And so that's a good spot. It's only open until like 2 or 3, but if you want to grab lunch and work downtown, that's been my spot. Then the other place we haven't mentioned at all, and I know Natalie has been there, at least Kyle, her husband, has been there, and that's the Hub in East Memphis, which I worked at yesterday.
It's nice. I'm
very
just never
nice.
out there, but it's
very
nice.
popular. So, you may not necessarily find a seat when you walk in because it's always slammed. That's the coffee shop inside the big church there.
High Point?
Near. They changed their name, so it's not called that anymore. But it's out in sort of the Ridgeway
old
4
original
area.
Briarcrest building.
Yeah, but they have good coffee, and it's a big, open, comfortable space. And if I'm in East Memphis and I'm like, I need to work for 2 hours and I need to be in this part of town, I'll find myself there a lot.
Let's go. We have 5-6 minutes left. So, bars, restaurants you work in? No. Were you a no on that kind of thing? Or so much?
The place that we talked about when we talked about beer spots, Hammer Nail is a good spot to do that, but not so much. So I'm actually excited to hear y'all's input on that.
I am not a work at the bar, work at the restaurant guy. I'm more of a read at the bar. I think that is great. That is like true enjoyment of life, is to have a book sitting at the bar, of a decent like burger or meal and a cocktail and a book. And I think that's great. I think I will find myself doing more of that kind of thing and maybe even working at the bar in my empty nest future, which is on the horizon.
Right.
I just think I don't find myself like out places working at night, because at night if I'm not at a Grizzlies game, I'm like I'm at home basically.
Right. Yeah, my place are and that's true. It was more of an empty nest thing. Apparently, my voice is just dying today.
You did it less when you had kids in the house.
Much less when I had kids in the house, and so now that they're gone. So, but I like actually one of my favorite places to work is Alchemy, because it's just they're really nice to me there, and it's fine. It's all good. It's fine, food wise and drink wise. I used to love to work at Sweetgrass. The old Sweetgrass in Cooper Young was a great place to work, and you could kind of see people.
Sweetgrass or next door?
Sweetgrass next door. Yeah.
The bar
and then when it was just the one big kind of Sweetgrass next door, which was, still don't understand why that's gone. And then, like Andrew Michael, I like a lot. Edge Alley, I always talk about, but for brunch, I work there. And they're all places that have really good food, and people are really nice. And are they varying degrees of food? But like Edge Alley is really good food. Andrew, the Bishop's really good food. And they're just cool with you working. Like they're not rushing you to get out of there. Who was it? The author who came on, like a year ago. I just drew a blank on her name. Tara, and she was talking about that, like working in Tara Stringfellow was talking about working in bars and working in restaurants, and will they kind of harass you, kind of look at you, kind of rush your bill? Because that's a bummer if you're trying to write your book, or you're trying to write a chapter, or you're trying to write a scene, or whatever you're trying to do. Or if I'm doing, day job stuff. So those places are all really good about that. And then weird kind of, sometimes I'll end up in a weird out east. I'll end up in like, what's that place called? Like Capitol Grill. They're really, they don't care. They'll let you just work.
That does make sense though.
Yeah. I mean, because I travel so much, particularly when I'm traveling for work, I'm like inevitably next to a weird chain restaurant, like a Capitol Grill or something, or those places tend to be pretty nice about letting me work. Whereas like when I travel, even for work, I try to find a place where I can get good food and I kind of look it all up. And then you get in there and if I'm traveling for work, I'm going to work all night. Some places just aren't cool about that. They're just, you can tell they don't like your laptop out. They don't like, and it's just, they just don't like it. So, other thought, but you're again, a book. What are your favorite book places in Memphis to read a book and have a meal?
It's still mostly like, I don't do that as much now because I got kids at home. And so this is the empty nest future my wife and I will look forward to, where we go to movies all the time and we go to bars and bring our books. For a while we were doing like family reading time, where we would go out to coffee shops and make the kids come and everyone would have a book and we'd sit there for an hour or two and read. Yeah. And so we would go to like, City and State or Come Back or Otherlands or places like that. But like, sitting at a bar at night reading, like that sounds great, but it's not really in the cards for me at the moment.
Yeah. We got just a minute left here. Any other last final thoughts here on stuff? No?
Talk Shop, the hotel lobby of one of those.
Yeah.
I keep meaning to try that. I've eaten there at lunch once, but I always forget about that as a place to go and bring my laptop.
It's pretty good. I actually will sometimes go there on the weekend. And sit, and you can sit outside there. That space is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And actually, I've started for brunch. I started going to Fancy's, which is right down the street from that. And apparently when it launched, it kind of had a rough launch and kind of made people unhappy. I now go there. It's very good. It's not trying to be like super creative Andrew Michael beauty shop kind of thing. It's real good. It's almost like it's like a Houston's or something. Like, I hope I don't offend anyone when I say that. Staff's really nice. It's a really cool. It's one of the few places where restaurants in Memphis where you can see the river.
Right.
It's not looking out over the river, but you can kind of see the park and the river and the bluff. And that's a kind of cool thing about it. So
yeah. So Talk Shop is at the Hyatt Caption. Yeah. These are all on Main Street.
Yeah.
Downtown.
And I was back at Cafe Keo for the first time in forever recently because that was fun. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Holly Whitfield. Thank you, Chris Harrington. Appreciate y'all being here. That is all the time. If you missed any of the show today, you can get the full episode on WYXR or on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can get all our podcasts on all those places, or Daily Memphian, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on WYXR, stay tuned for me talking to Mike McCarthy, filmmaker, sculptor, and many other things, who's on the sidebar. If you're not listening on WYXR, you can get that episode on WYXR or on iTunes, Spotify, or Daily Memphian. I've said that many times now. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.